Welcome back to day 36 of our chess journey to 1500 ELO on chess.com. Let's just jump on ahead into our browser and look for an opponent rather. We get choose what from South Korea, and they play 1e4. We'll go for the Sicilian. Here I think this is what we have been playing. For some reason it's been so long since we got a position like the Najdorf, which was what I was looking at previously. This hasn't, I haven't looked at this in a while, so this might not even be a good idea to go into, I'm realizing, but I do know the general ideas here. I think we could move our knight up, we could play e6, or we could play for this diagonal here. So let me think a bit here. I think I would like to put our knight out here first. If they capture, we capture like this. They move their queen up, presumably to hit our bishop if we fianchetto. There might be an argument for playing like this, but then we have to be careful we don't hang our knight. So I don't think this necessarily has to dissuade us from fianchettoing, but after this and this, we can't castle either. So I think e6 is going to be better here, I think, as long as we don't have a bishop move. Those squares here are no good, and this doesn't do a whole lot either, as it's going to help our opponent attack us. So let's go ahead and play like this, and then we might look at developing our bishop onto this diagonal later on instead. We do have a somewhat confrontational opponent here, it seems, as they castle queenside and are probably preparing for an attack down here. So let me think a little bit here. Which options do we have? Preferably I would like to trade down some of their most annoying attacking pieces here. For some reason this move is enticing to me. And then if they move up here, we could hit the bishop like this perhaps, but I don't quite like the position after this necessarily. Or does this work? This is probably not the best idea here, as we should probably just develop, but I don't think we will have any better chances at getting this bishop off the board. Just want to make sure they don't have any options of keeping it. This runs into a fork. This, and we could try to get it off like this. And they can't play up here, so I think we'll go ahead and grab this bishop. I'm hoping I haven't missed anything here, but I'm hopeful we should be in an okay spot. And now if we do get this bishop off the board, I think we could look at fianchettoing. Or we could look at a quicker castle. This g6 move gives us an incredible diagonal for our bishop, but it would take one extra tempo here, which is something we might not quite have in this position. Well, we are probably going to get the bishop here at least. So I am quite optimistic. Or after this move, we might not get the bishop here, but we will have an idea here of trading their bishop off. And this, I think, is a powerful attacking piece for our opponent, so I'm quite happy to get rid of it. So let's have a quick look here. We are still threatening this fork, so the queen can't move. So it has to defend this pawn. Now I'm looking at something though. If we play this move, we could actually look at this and we get the fork still. This is typically speaking an awkward move to play, but I think we got our bases covered. So let's go in like this, and I think we'll strike our opponent with this move here. I just realized though, this doesn't work at all. I did realize the second our opponent's bishop moved backwards to this square, it would cover this, and now it's even covered by the queen. So this makes no sense at all. When that happens, we made an error in our calculations, and we will have to find a way of dealing with this, because now our position is quite suboptimal. So which options do we have here? Now if they hit our knight, it would have to go back to this square, which is awkward. I think we have to move our bishop. We probably don't have this move. Then they could even just capture and we lose our rook. So this probably has to be played. This I think does nothing. We would just keep on weakening our position. So let's move up here then. Luckily, at least, our opponent doesn't have a whole lot of ideas there, but we do get kicked back a bit here. We could look at this. I think this is probably a lot better than our alternative here. But if we go here, they will hit us with tempo, and we would have to fall back, but then we hit their queen again. I think this is probably our best chance here of getting our knight into the game. We could even have the idea of hitting their bishop again. This f6 move is something I would have liked to take back. I didn't want to play it unless we had the tactic. I thought we did, but for some reason my calculations were entirely off today. I am expecting our opponent here to probably play something like this. And then this doesn't work. I think at least, simply because it allows our opponent to play back here and keep on attacking us. So after this, I think we probably just want to hit the queen. As long as I'm not missing any other moves here, which I don't seem to be missing at least. So let's go back this way. Now we have to think here. I think we have to be conscious. We might have to castle queenside, because our king side is quite compromised. I would have typically liked to play like this and put our bishop onto b7. We might still consider that move, but it would open up our potential king sanctuary, or our castling square at least. But we do have to think still here, is this such a weak spot? If we just delay castling, it might not be so. This is a bit of a difficult position to maneuver here, but I think I'm looking at b5 here. We are not down material at least, which is quite nice to see, but even still our position is not the best right now. Let's go ahead and play b5. I think our main issue here is our opponent has all of their pieces active apart from this one rook on h1, whereas our king is in the middle of the board and can get hit like this, for example, after which we might have to weaken our position even further, unless we want our king in the middle of the board. Or, no, I think we would have to block here. But yeah, we do want to get our bishop up and our queen up to connect our rooks. So we are a few tempi behind, and we have weaknesses in addition to that. So this is going to be an interesting battle here, I think. At least we have limited some of our opponent's offensive options here, as they can't just bulldoze us with all their pieces. This seeks to play this, I think. It x-rays the knight and the rook here through this diagonal. But I don't think it's a massive threat after this move. Let's have a quick look here. I think we could capture like this, and then their bishop would be hit. And then after we castle, we will have an open file for our rook. That's my idea here at least. So let's go ahead and play this move. So I am once again looking at kingside castling. However, we have to be careful if we do decide to castle kingside. I don't quite know which square would be best for our queen yet, but I guess we'll figure out as we go. I was looking at this move, but I'm not quite fond of leaving our queen on the same file as this rook. This also defends our dark squares here, so we don't get infiltrated as easily by moves like this, for example. Which by itself doesn't do a whole lot, but it does exert a bit of pressure. So here I think our opponent could even consider playing g4 and just trying to hit us with a pawn storm. And then we probably have to come up with a solution here. Luckily we still have 9 minutes, so we are not in a horrible position just yet, but our position on the board at least is not desirable. They hit this weakness on e6. Now I'm even less enticed with the thought here of hitting or getting our queen up to d7, as it would be pinned in 2 directions. But we probably want to defend this in some way. Does this work? This does not work at all, as we lose a pawn and we would be under incredible pressure. We might have to make some concessions here, or this might actually work when I'm looking at it like this, because it hits this and this at the same time, so they can't capture. And instead then I think they might go on ahead and play this, this, and this. We might end up down a pawn here though, but it would kill off their most aggressive attacking pieces, which I'm honestly liking the idea of. There might be better moves here. I'm not seeing any right now. This doesn't work. I would have liked for it to work, but then we get hit with this check and we still lose a pawn. So let's move up here then. This is likely to happen. If this is played, we play like this and we probably win a piece. So after this, this, and this, we could have some ideas of opening up this diagonal here at some point by moving our knight and then potentially winning this pawn. So we might not necessarily be down a pawn, and it's important to note here we haven't moved our queen or our king yet, so we might have the option of castling still. Now I am thinking of playing this move, simply to protect this square. But if we do play it, then this, this, and this, and we can't quite capture back, simply because we would be pinned to our queen with our knight here. Pinned by their queen rather. So I think I want to play this instead and look at our options for queenside castling. So let's grab this pawn. They take. And I don't think we have any good in-between moves here. This might not be good at all, because after this and this, we will be under a lot of pressure. However, we will probably win back the pawn. So this might not be as bad as it looks like. However, it's not an ideal position. I think our best move is probably just capturing here, as I'm not seeing any alternatives. If we try something like this, I think our opponent might be able to force the matter, or they might not actually. But this and the situation is not really any different. There might be an argument for playing this, just castling, but then our opponent will probably be up. Yeah, they would force the queen trade, and they would be up 2 pawns, and it would be a connected passed pawn. And that's not ideal, so I think this is probably our best shot. So I'm expecting this capture. Alternatively, there might be an argument for playing this, but that would lose, I think, because we can capture. And it's important to note we have 2 defenders of our queen here, so they can't capture our queen. Our king is still able to act as a defender. So this might be an option, but they don't go for it. Here I mentioned we probably are in a decent spot. However, this might not be ideal. If we capture, They capture and we are in check. And I think as long as we don't move onto this file here, or the second rank, we are probably in a good spot. We might even still be in a good spot. I think our opponent might have blundered. As long as I'm not missing anything, which I did indeed do, they could move out of the way here and we will lose our queen. This doesn't quite work. I think best case scenario here, we'll trade like this. So let's have a quick look here. This, and we trade our knight back. This. So this might not be the end of the world, as we can sack our knight back to keep our queen, I hope. It's definitely not a dream position though. And then if they apply more pressure here, for example with their queen, we could castle and we would be down a pawn, but we would not be down a queen, which I think is the most important part here. We can't castle this way, I'm noticing, because this pawn is going to capture. They take. And here I'm curious as to whether we have this move or not. I'm not seeing why it would be all that different from just capturing like this. So we might keep our options open and have this check on the board still. As I mentioned, we can't castle just yet, which is awkward, but it might not be the end of the world. I think we might have to capture. If we do, they get this file, but they still pressure this either way, and they would capture this if we don't. I'm honestly hoping here that our opponent makes a slight mistake and allows us to castle, but if they do keep this cage around our king, we might be in for a rough time. So if I played as our opponent here, is there a good move? I'm looking at this, for example. This move would threaten this to win the queen, and it would still keep this file occupied. They find the move. So this might have been an argument for playing queen to g5 earlier on and going for the check. Does this work, or is this bad? This does not work because of this. Do we have this move? Then they could win a pawn, but we will probably get out of the center at least. They could capture. And generally speaking, our position here is quite abysmal, as I mentioned. This might give us some tactical chances at least. We could hit the queen like this, which would mean they would have to capture with the queen in this position. And we would lose a pawn, but we won't lose our queen. So I think I like this a bit better. If they capture here, we can finally castle at long last. they take the pawn. And here I think we will have a... Oh, it's not going to be a decent position. That's probably a lie. But we will get our king to what could be considered semi-safety. Here I'm looking at moves like this to create some counterattacks. Our opponent finds a fork. Can we defend against this, or is this a lost piece for us? We cannot hit the rook here, as it's covered. And we can't defend this bishop diagonally. So this is an impressive move by our opponent. Which alternatives do we have? We have 1 minute left on our clock here, so this might not be ideal. I'm not seeing any great moves. And this is awkward. Do have to play a move though. So I guess we'll try building up some pressure here. This might have not been the best move by a long shot, but I simply could not see any good alternatives. After this capture, this hits the rook, but apart from doing that, it doesn't do a whole lot. And also, if we move our queen away, they could go in and check us. And we could go into the corner, but then they have this check because of the diagonal. Let's have a look at getting this rook into a potential attack instead. Which alternatives does our opponent have? They might try to trade along this file. And I'm not seeing a good alternative to trading, to be honest. Because otherwise, if we move away, they get this move, and this is going to be difficult to defend. So after this, I think we have to trade. I'm expecting probably... They do have 3 alternatives. They might want to keep their queen here. They jump in with the knight, which is a really good move because it kills off our threats here and it also hits our queen. Let's try to fork them. This isn't quite a fork though, because this knight is defended by the rook. They play like this, and let's move our queen up. If our opponent moves their queen and the knight here, we might have an idea like this, 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 and this, which might be a checkmate, but that's not quite likely to happen. Now we do also have this idea. But then our opponent could move here and still defend the knight. This is a check, but it loses to this. They force the queens off the board. And we still can't infiltrate because of the knight. So what do we go for here then? Let's try to hit it so that we can get into their position. It's still defended though, so they can capture this pawn. I do have to say, really well played to our opponent so far. Choose what, you have been playing incredibly. I'm finding it difficult to create a lot of counterplay here, and our opponent is managing to simplify in a good way. So I'm curious here when we go into the game review where we should have played differently and how bad of a move f6, for example, was when we went for the tactic that I just completely miscalculated. If I played here as our opponent, I might have considered this move. Simply going after the pawn, but I would have wanted to trade down material as well, considering the material advantage. So, which moves could accomplish that? This move looks a bit interesting. It hits this pawn, and it allows for this move, which pins our rook to our king, so we would have to trade off at least a rook. They go for this move. It does come with this threat here. I'm not seeing a good way of dislodging this immediately. So I want to try to create some counter threats. They could still jump back though, but we could pick up this pawn first and then maybe get this other rook into the game. Let's hit the knight. I don't think we want to trade rooks. If they go back here, we could have gone for the draw offer. They jump in. And honestly, I'm not seeing a whole lot here. I'm trying to play quickly. So now I'm trying to hit this pawn like this, for example. We see g4. And I'll try to avoid our opponent's knight squares. It's quite easy going onto all of those squares here, so we do have to be careful. Okay, g5. Let's try to go in this way, perhaps. This is looking a bit awkward. This pawn here is a bit annoying now, as it takes away some important squares around our king. But it doesn't do a whole lot by itself. I would still look to move this knight out of the way if I was playing as our opponent here. And then I would try to trade off on the 8th file. We are still only playing with increment for the time being, so this might be difficult to convert, or rather to come back in. But there might be some stalemate tricks, or for, some perpetual checks, for example, down the road. They can't try to trade off like this. Even a simple slow move like this might be good for our opponent, as it would disallow us from threatening any checkmates along the first file here. Or the first rank, I guess it's called. I hope the noises from upstairs aren't all that loud to you guys. Currently our neighbors are doing some work. I think they're fixing their floor. try to play quickly. I think our opponent is probably going to just try to force the rook trades whenever they can. If this is played, I think we might go like this, but they defend it. So let's move our rook up here then. I considered this, but we would have lost to this knight move. Now if they try to trade, we would have had... this is a checkmate threat. So we might have to sack a pawn to get this h7 square, otherwise this would have been checkmate. Or we would have had to sack our rook like this and gone... yeah, it would have still been a checkmate, I'm realizing. After this, I think we could take the pawn, or we could hide behind it. I think I would like to take the pawn though. And then we would still threaten this pawn on h2. So which alternatives does our opponent have? They could just keep this pawn here on g5, they don't have to take. As if we take, our king is going to be even more compromised. This forces our hand, we have to move our king up. They take, and if we go here, then we get hit with this perhaps. So I think I prefer this instead. Which does run into this fork. And now I think this is... we have lost our chances of counterplay the second they capture our rook. So this should be a trivial conversion for our opponent. So instead of drawing this out, I will go ahead and say well played. Choose what? And then we will resign. And now I want to have a look at the analysis, as today we did make some quite critical mistakes, I think. Let's have a quick look here. They played with a 92.5% accuracy, and we played with an 86% accuracy. Generally speaking, that's a pretty good game overall, but we did make some mistakes that we should look at even still. We got into a Najdorf, which we have not done in a while, and here we played into a quite normal position. Apparently we should have already went for this move, which does at least reinforce the idea here that it was a good idea. But now it didn't quite work. Why is that? In this position, why is this not playable? And bishop to g7, and apparently this is okay for us. I wouldn't have liked to weaken us on the weaken our position on the king side though. We went in like this, and even here we should have apparently gotten our queen up. We traded and put our bishop up like this. We went back. This square was apparently better. I don't think I considered this square, to be honest, but it does make sense that it was a decent move. It does sound like our our neighbors have started working on their floor again. I've been trying to avoid this for today at least. They have been working upstairs for a few weeks, so I'll try to finish as quickly as possible here, so we don't have to include a lot of background noise in the recording. This was not the best idea. We should have went up like this first instead, prior to pushing the pawn. This was not the best idea either. We should have apparently went back along this diagonal. We traded, and those were all best moves. And here I thought we might have won a piece, but our opponent found a good idea. This counter sack was the best idea, but here we apparently made a mistake. It's only a slight difference in terms of evaluation here, but it would have been better to play bishop to c6. That does not make sense to me. Why is this a good move? What happens here if they try to force this, for example? Well, then we would have been able to castle. So I guess our opponent can't quite get to us in this position. But even here, in this position, here I'm not seeing our best move. Well, we got into this, we castled, and they found this fork. Yeah, that's why. I'm realizing we had to avoid that fork as it was a massive threat. We did play some okay moves, but our opponent found slightly better ones. We tried to create some counterplay, but if we traded material, we would have had too little to create anything. Our opponent played really well moves here, really good ones. This was an only move, I think. And here, at this point, this was, as I mentioned, a pretty trivial conversion. Our opponent's king had better activity. They were a rook up and also a pawn up. Well, once again, thanks a lot for the game, Choose What from South Korea. Thanks a lot to all of you for watching to the end of the video, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye bye!